What I would like to talk about today is we are not alone. A lot of us feel that in our lives we're going it alone. And every now and then we reach out and say, God, help me. And we think that's when God comes and listens. But it is of my opinion that God is there all the time because he is within us. We are part of him. He is not part of us. We are part of him. And so Jan and I were driving, we went to Boise, Idaho, and listening to a lot of different things. And we had the opportunity to listen to this one lady that had a near-death experience. And she started talking about this, and the way that she described it, I don't know if Jan wants to try and describe it. It was amazing.
Near the end of her talk, somehow she was shown way, way down deep inside her that God was always there. And she was shocked. She was like, "You've been there the whole time?" And he said, "You can't separate from me any more than you can separate from your own DNA." Yeah. I thought that was beautiful.
And it's beautiful to hear things like that when it actually helps to solidify something inside of you that you've always wondered. We cannot separate from him the same way we cannot separate from our own DNA. And I thought, wow, that's heavy. But what about when I do things wrong? What about when I sin? And I was just driving along thinking about all these things. And I believe that this is when God is waiting patiently, not judging. Obviously, it's our choice. We have to have free choice. Otherwise, it would not be the way he created it. He created it to where we have the choice to do good or evil. And a lot of people, they waste their lives because they don't believe. And I realize that this believing thing, this faith thing that he talks about, saying that if we had the faith of a mustard seed, we could move mountains. I believe that most of us are waiting for faith to come to us. We're waiting to have the feeling, okay, I know what faith is now. I feel it. It isn't a feel thing. It isn't something we feel. It is something that we live. And it's in tiny little things, little grains of sand, and how we live each and every day move us closer to God. I remember hearing my father say, "What are you willing to give up to be closer to God?" And it's all these little things that we give up, that we say no to. We say, "No, not today, Satan." That we are moving ourselves closer to God by our choices, by how we live our lives. The little things that no one except God knows about. The little thoughts, when you deny these little dirty thoughts, whatever they are, as little as being dishonest in some little thing, telling a little white lie, as they call it. There's no such thing as a white lie. A lie is a lie is a lie is a lie. And when we start telling little white lies, we start down the road away from God. It's like we take an exit off the freeway. We're heading towards God, and here's a little white lie. Ups, get off the road, take the exit. Now where do we go? A whole nother trip begins, a whole nother journey with a little white lie or some little transgression.
I think I take a little bit of exception when you say we do good or bad. We don't do good or bad. We bring it into fruition.
Fair enough.
I've just, I haven't really read the Bible a lot because for me, there's some kind of a block there because of what happened in school. And so on Facebook, I've been getting a lot of Bible quotes and things like that. And it seems like God's always there.
Pick up the Bible. Facebook is not a good place to get your Bible study, but that's all right. There's nothing wrong. Listen, a lot of us, we fear the Bible in some ways, which is an odd thing to say because someone misrepresented the Bible.
I'll read something and I don't think I'm understanding the words right.
Sometimes when you don't understand something, look up words. My dad was one of those kind of people that would read the Bible and then he would say, I don't understand something about that, so I'm going to look up the word. He'd look up the word and then he'd look up the origins of the word, so he could better understand it. And my dad's famous thing is, I had my eye on that seat and a woman sat on it. Did she sit on my eye or did she sit on the seat? So some things get translated differently, and so that's why you have to know and understand, the meaning of the word and the origins of the word. When you reach that point, like you're at your point today maybe in your life where you want to understand the Bible better, you'll also have to go on the secondary journey of understanding words better. Because sometimes, I read the Bible and I go, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. I don't get it. And then maybe I'll read a little further and I'll go, oh, now that makes sense. So what happens is if we stop and go, I don't understand, I'm going to close the book and walk away from it. You can find yourself that you walked away from it for maybe years because you just didn't understand one little thing. But you need to go a little further. Anyway, I just realized that the way that I've been living my life is that I haven't really understood God. Really, truly. And I still don't. It's something I believe is a journey. But as I go down this path in my life, I'm starting to understand more about how God is really the creator of the DNA itself. And he wove himself into the DNA. Actually it's more the spirit of the DNA, the spirit behind the DNA. The DNA is the mechanics of us. That's what make you look like you and him look like him and her look like her and the rest of us. These are the mechanical bits and pieces, but then there's that Holy Spirit part, the spirit that is the breath. Now, I want to have Jan read something.
All right. So we found somebody posted this on Facebook. It says, there was a moment when Moses had the nerve to ask God what his name is. God was gracious enough to answer, and the name he gave is recorded in the original Hebrew as YHWH. Over time, we've arbitrarily added an A and an E in there to get Yahweh, presumably because we have a preference for vowels. But scholars and rabbis have noted that the letters YHWH represent breathing sounds or aspirated consonants. When pronounced without intervening vowels, it actually sounds like breathing. YH is inhale and WH is exhale. So a baby's first cry, his first breath speaks. I can't read this.
Come on.
It's just going to make me cry. Somebody else has to read it.
No, you got to finish it now. Sorry. She says,
I can't do it.
Diane try. Sweet. It's all right. You'll finish it. Just take a break. Take a break. Come on.
So a baby's first cry, his first breath. I can't do it.
You did it in the car.
Okay.
Okay, come on.
So a baby's first cry, his first breath, speaks the name of God. It's too emotional to me. I don't know why. So a baby's first cry, his first breath, speaks the name of God. A deep sigh calls his name, or a groan or gasp that is too heavy for mere words. Even an atheist would speak his name. I'm sorry, you guys. I don't know why I just can't read it.
Bo can do it. All right, so Bo Hansen is going to finish. Jan was too broken up. Here we go.
So a baby's first cry, his first breath, speaks the name of God. A deep sigh calls his name, or a groan or gasp that is too heavy for mere words. Even an atheist would speak his name, unaware that their very breath is giving constant acknowledgement to God. Likewise, a person leaves this earth with their last breath, when God's name is no longer filling their lungs. So when I can't utter anything else, is my cry calling out his name? Being alive means I speak his name constantly. So is it heard the loudest when I'm the quietest? In sadness, we breathe heavy sighs. In joy, our lungs feel almost like they will burst. In fear, we hold our breath and have to be told to breathe slowly to help us calm down. When we're about to do something hard, we take a deep breath to find our courage. When I think about it, breathing is giving him praise, even in the hardest moments. This is so beautiful and fills me with emotion every time I grasp the thought. God chose to give himself a name that we can't help but speak every moment we're alive. All of us, always, everywhere, waking, sleeping, breathing, with the name of God on our lips.
That is just beautiful. Talk about the DNA. What an interesting thing. I don't know. Has anybody else ever heard that before? Chuck, have you ever heard anything like that? I know Bo had mentioned something about that one time. But what's nice about it is that you can't help but appreciate the breath that you breathe, that God puts the breath into you, because when the breath leaves you, that's when God leaves the flesh, the earthly body, and that's when your spirit also leaves and hopefully goes to where God is. And so many of us wonder about that last breath. And what is it when God breathed his breath into us, into Adam? He breathed his breath into Adam, and that was life itself. And God is life, and his breath is life. But it's so beautiful to be able to actually consider the fact that every breath we take is an utterance of his existence, whether we like it or not, like they talk about the atheists. And I think that's almost kind of a funny thing to me when somebody's an atheist and you know what you know now, that God's name is simply the breath. You think to yourself, well, you just don't know, and maybe someday you will, hopefully. Hopefully all of us will. And the other night when I was sick, I think a few weeks ago when I did the show afterwards, I said it feels so good to just feel no pain. And the problem is we usually have to feel pain before we appreciate. And what I'm trying to learn how to do in my life is to appreciate every moment of my life. It's hard to appreciate every breath you take, but once you realize that every breath you take is perhaps saying a little prayer of thanks, every breath we take is life that we have to do good or to not do good with, if you know what I'm saying, to Roger's comment. I want to use my life, what's left, to try and better this world in some way according to God's will, using me. Here I am, God. Use me. I'm a willing subject. It's a funny thing. It really is. Jan says to me on the way home, she says, out of the blue, I'm driving along, and she calls me Bub. She says, Bub, do you have any accomplishments that you want to do? Do you have anything that you haven't done that you want to do? And I thought, no, I don't have anything that I want to do. What I want to do more than anything now is to be a servant of the Father in heaven so that he can use me so that my life is not a waste. I'm not a parasite on this world, just a consuming parasite. I desire to be used for his will on earth as it is in heaven. And I don't know what heaven is, so all I can do is be obedient to what he puts in my heart because he knows what heaven is. I don't. So that's why I have to be careful not to put my own will into it or my own design. Have you ever thought, well, we could do this and we could do that. Let's design it all out. And somehow the design that we do just won't work. But there's another plan that starts taking shape. And you have to give up your will and give up your ego and be able to do something that is not near as grandiose maybe as you want it to do. Usually it works out just right.
I don't think it's necessarily giving up your will. It's kind of aligning your will with God. Because when your whole desire inside is to do what God's will is, that's your will. You know, that you're aligning yourself with God. And God has a plan. And I was talking to someone earlier this week about, they just want to know what to do. They want to know the exact thing of what God wants them to do. And I said, I used to be there, but that takes the faith aspect out of it. God will tell us to go, but he's not going to tell us exactly where to go sometimes. He shows us where we're going to place our next foot, but he doesn't show us all the way around the corner because that takes the aspect of faith out of it. And when we don't have to have faith, if we already know the outcome on something, that just takes the faith completely gone. And there's something very powerful that happens inside of us when we manifest that faith. when we really push into that faith and trust completely in God's plan and what God's will is.
I guess I said that because I associate my will with willfulness, with pride, which is not God's will, that's the other guy's will.
Oftentimes, something will come up and you'll get the urge to do something, and you know it's coming from, or you think it's coming from God. And I think about Moses when God told him to take off his sandals. And I think we get a simple task, and it doesn't make any sense to us, but it's a form of obedience.
I want to go back to this idea of feeling like we're separate from God when he basically says, you're never separate from me. So how is it that we can think we're separate, but we're not? Think about the principle that we can believe we're separate from God when we're not. The original lie was that we could be something other than what we really were. So the fact that we can walk around feeling separate from God, it's a mindset that separates us. It's not a truth. It's kind of like sin is nothing more, we all know this, than believing a lie and believing a reality that isn't. So it's actually sort of a mental illness, if you want to say it that way, where we're disconnected from what is really true.
I had something unusual happen to me the other day. I was walking because I like to walk, and I came upon a rock. The rock says, "Be a patriot," and it says 76, and the back says Romans 8:38. And I looked it up in the Bible, and it has to do with what we're talking about today. And lately I've been really inclined to I've got a hunger now for the Bible because I really want to know what's going on. And I'm finding that when I read it, it's like an awakening. And it's like, oh, wow, that's what it means?
For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come. So let's start at 36. As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nevertheless, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in his Son, Christ Jesus, our Lord.
See, Catherine, how the Bible, it's very mysterious and magical. And if somebody says, read this, and you start right there, you may not really understand what the context is. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope. And my dad used to say, just pick up the Bible and start anywhere. And whenever I would do that, I would do, I think, what we just did right there. I'd put my finger down, and because, of course, when my dad said that, I'd say, all right, well, let's see what that is. And he wouldn't even be saying it to me. He might be saying it to somebody on the radio. But then I go, well, that makes no sense. So now I got to go back. And that was maybe part of my dad's trick because it made no sense. I have to start at the beginning of the chapter, which then got me to read a whole lot more than just where I put my finger. But to me, life, we talked this morning about being lazy or sleeping in. And I want to sleep in, but I can't. And I find that I want to be lazy, but I can't. I want to do all these things that, retirement. I can't. I don't know what all these things mean. I am hungry to wake up every day. I try to sleep in. And then there's like a little child inside of me going, come on, wake up. Let's go. We got to go out and play. Life is there waiting for us. And that's how I feel, is that every day is such an adventure. I don't know if I'm going to run into somebody in the store. Jan and I were walking back from coffee the other day in Boise, and this man was talking to this woman about, 23andMe, and I just happened to hear that as we walked up, he says, yeah, 23andMe, and I went, oh, 23andMe, there it is. One of my brothers did it and found a relative, and it was, now my father is passed on, and we found out there's a lot of different relatives around the world. And so as I'm walking down the street, here this person is saying, this person found a relative they didn't even know they had, a half sister, and I said, yeah, we have a whole bunch of family we didn't even know we had. And all of a sudden, here we are into this conversation just from walking down the road. You don't know what conversation you're going to bump into if you're walking, looking down at your feet when you're walking, and being closed-minded, being afraid to speak to people. I have been gifted with the desire to communicate with everyone. And I know my dad used to do that. I watched him do that my whole life. We'd be in an elevator, he'd always be talking to somebody, and in the grocery store line or walking down the street. So to me, life is such a miracle. And Jan said something the other day about, and I don't know whether you read it, heard it, but if you just sit around in your house, you're not really living.
I think we were talking about how you're supposed to integrate with other people, because that's the flow of life. Blessings come through you and through other people. And if you just isolate yourself, then you're kind of cut off from the flow of life. I think that might be what.
Yeah, that's right. Because even if somebody says something you don't like, something you disagree with, there's the opportunity to have a discussion. Well, what do you mean? Can you explain that better? And maybe then as they're explaining it, they realize, well, I don't know. Yeah, I can tell you don't know. Or maybe there's a conversation to be had where normally you would just walk away from it. I'm not saying you engage in every single conversation that is in front of you. You have to pick and choose. But I feel like that as we go through our lives, we're supposed to communicate with others, and something is there. Jan watched a video, another piece of that same video, where the woman was talking about when she was judging somebody.
So in this experience, she had sort of a life review, and she thought, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid to see some of the things I've done. And she said, interestingly, those aren't the things that were shown to me. And the things that I thought I'd done really well, those weren't shown to me either. So there was two things. First, the good. She said, I was in the store one day, and there was a lady in front of me who was short cash for her food, and she was trying to take things out so she could finish paying for it. And she said, oh, I got this. It's no problem. She goes, I've been in that situation before. And so I just paid for the rest of her food, and that was it. And then the next scene God showed her was that same woman working at a food shelter, helping others, because she was inspired by that one small thing. We have no idea how we affect others. We don't even know it. Then she said, and the negative thing that he showed me was, she said, it's a very difficult thing. She said, but what I was shown, that when I have negative thoughts about other people, that energy actually goes on to them. And she says, I've always heard people say when you forgive, you're really helping yourself. She said it actually does help the other person because you're removing that negative energy off of them. I thought that was really interesting.
It's interesting how judgment is such a dark force. And when you judge somebody, it changes the energy that's in the room, that's being exchanged. And you can put a smile on and say, hi, how you doing? How's it going? Well, under your breath, you're thinking, you dirty, rotten bastard. Have you ever dealt with somebody like that hates your guts, and they're smiling at your face? There's an energy, there's a wickedness to it.
And she said that energy, she was shown that energy actually helps that person to stay that way and become more like that. And when you remove that and, seeing past a person's sin and knowing that there's more to that person and wanting to bring the good out of them, or just not judging. But anyway, that it actually helps people to stay in that state.
I think with our children and with younger people, it is more powerful in that way. Because I have a lot of people that judge me, that don't like me, and I've watched my father who, they judge him and they don't like him and they hate him. It doesn't affect him at all. There's like an invisible force field when you're in the right energy, when you're living the right life, it doesn't matter what the people do around you or say or hate or judge. It doesn't matter. It bounces off. But with children, it tends to be harmful. If you are that way with children, it definitely is a harmful ray, you might say, like a ray gun.
If we realize that most people are sort of asleep, so it's going to affect them more. Once you wake up and you make that connection inside yourself, you are affecting more on the outside of you. But I get the principle.
As we go through our lives and we're able to peel the onion, peel away layers of our childhood, of our judgments, self-judgments, judgments of others, perceptions. I mean, we perceive life, what do they say? Perception is reality, right? As we start to realize that our perceptions are part of a mirage, you might say, that the dark side allows us to see this phony world, this phony life that is really not real. We keep on spinning that dream out in front of us. There's a real life that is the life that comes from God, and then there is this mirage life. I don't know how to explain it better than that the devil allows us all to live in. It's an illusion, and it's a fantasy, and it's a mirage, and guess what? One day, the stark reality of it comes to haunt you, and you realize, oh my gosh, I have been serving the wrong God, the self-God. I've been serving the wrong God, and all of a sudden, everything that you've built in your life, you realize it has no value. And I'm getting to that stage of my own life where I used to think that all the things that I had and the things that I wanted and the perceived values of things, that if I could just achieve all those things, that I could be this man that I wanted to be. And now as I'm getting older, I realize none of that is real. It's all a big fake, phony fantasy that the devil has allowed me to spin this fantasy for my own self. And all of a sudden I realize, wow, I've been the emperor's clothes. I've been the emperor of my own crazy kingdom. And now I could see that everybody could always see that I was not this real person. It's just kind of the awakening process. We can't force ourselves to do anything. It's just a process of life that we slowly go through. And one day we have that aha moment.
I was going to say something. That movie, The Chosen? It's funny because when I watch it, I see Matthew, he's all like, because he's a tax collector, and he's all like arrogant. You can see he's trying to find what ring he's going to wear and what shoes and what thing he's going to look in the closet to wear. So it seemed like his whole life is kind of built on materialistic things that are motivating him and got him in that position from the beginning.
That's exactly right. You just described most of us. What should I wear today, and how are people going to perceive me?
How does my hair look?
How does this beautiful coiffed of hair look? Anybody else have anything they want to comment or add to the conversation?
I am enjoying that movie, The Chosen. Nicodemus couldn't heal Mary because he didn't have the power. It took God to do it. Because it showed him like what he was really made. He wasn't all there. He didn't have it within him.
Well, Nicodemus was supposed to have the power. This is before Christ, so the people weren't supposed to deal with the church directly. They had to have an adversary, and that's what Nicodemus was. He was a priest, and that was his job, to heal people and do things. But you're right, he did not have the power. He wasn't coming from the right place.
Did you hear about the news that the one priest that was baptizing people was saying, instead of, I baptize you in the name of, he said, we baptize you. And literally one word off, they said that there's thousands of baptisms that were done, and now they have to be all redone, and maybe even their marriages aren't valid. And it was all over the news, and I think to myself, That is just pure insanity. They are so locked into the mechanics of it all that they forget the whole spirit of it. And I hope this is an awakening for the Catholics. There's been so many things that have happened that tend to affect the way we live our lives. And if mechanically one little thing is out of place, then your whole life is, oh my gosh, I've been doing everything wrong. And so that is an opportunity for them to wake up. And I laugh at this kind of stuff, thinking to myself, I'm glad I'm not trapped in that kind of a trap.
Talking about the Catholic religion, I remember as a child I'd go to the Catholic Church, and I could never understand why my mom was in front of a statue there, kneeling at it, and I couldn't figure it out. I just saw it so strange, and it's because my little light inside was saying, that's not quite right.
Well, and a lot of people are just taught these things, and that's part of the culture they were brought up in. And my dad, he said to me, don't bother coming to visit me at my grave when I'm gone. I'm not there. That's just a bunch of bones and flesh. And I've thought about that, actually. So now that he's gone, I thought, should I go see my dad? And then I laugh at myself. I think, that is silliness. My dad is within me all the time. And then I get embarrassed thinking, oh no, he knows what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. We can't come to know the Creator and know our fathers through logic only. It doesn't work. That logic is just one characteristic of God. There's that whole other spiritual aspect of the unexplained. And like Nicodemus knew inside and out, he knew all the rituals, all the religious rituals. The rituals won't help you. And there's that whole other aspect of faith to get to know the Creator. And that's just a journey, I think, that you don't stop on earth. That's the whole reason we're here. You're never going to fully understand. I think it's impossible to fully understand the Father here on earth. I think if you do, you walk with Him every day, and then you do what happened to Enoch. He just takes you up. And I don't think a problem is we today want to do it all through logic. It wants to be all done through logic. And there's two types of people back in Jesus' day. There was the Sadducees and the Pharisees, right? And one group of people was looking for miracles. The Jews, they wanted to see miracles. They wanted to see Him perform miracles. And then the Greeks wanted the law. They wanted the logic. They were coming about it two different ways. And it's just that two different characteristics of God. He's neither just one. He's both and together. And it's really hard for certain people, like left-brain people, tend to be really just logic and numbers based, and the right side creative and more in touch with intuition and whatnot. Some people call that the masculine and feminine traits of God. But it's really important not to get too wrapped up in those rituals. And I think that's the reason so much pain and suffering has been caused in this world is from this worship of these religious rituals and personality worship. And it's missing the whole entire picture of the relationship that our Father desires for us to have. Just like our brain is full of nerves that fire together, well, the nerves that fire together stay together. The more you do something, the more that bond gets created. So the more that we step out in faith and the more we listen to that intuition, that Holy Spirit, that bond gets stronger. And the more that we don't, the more that we listen to the other side, right? It's just like feeding the wolf. It reinstates that other side, and the other side grows. It's just those little tiny conscious decisions that really strengthen that relationship. And it's like tuning your radio station in just a little bit more and getting rid of some of that static going on. You're going to hear more precisely and walk more precisely in your Father's will.
It's an awakening. It's a slow awakening, and that's why it seems to take so very long for us to realize this stuff. It's nice if somehow you can be so-called good in the beginning, because then you don't have to come back so far to find these things out. For each of us, it's different, and it's not a logical learning. It's through grace. It's the awakening through this undeserved love that He has for us.
And I was standing there while I was holding the microphone for Roger, and I became conscious of my breathing, and I just thought, thank you for this breath. And if you can live every breath of your life being thankful then you are inviting the Holy Spirit into you, because life itself is precious. And then we start trying to add things to it. Just breathe and be thankful for that breath, because someday you'll exhale and that will be your last one. And while you're breathing, you better learn how to appreciate, because if you walk in that appreciation, then everything changes. Everything God has for you will be made known to you if you live in His light instead of your own fake lights that we put on ourselves like Hollywood.
If you think about the fact that, an atheist or a person that believes there is no God, when you realize you don't even know how you're alive, where your life comes from. I remember laying in bed as a child and just being aware of my heart beating and my body and thinking, I don't even know how this works. Who's making it work? But we can get to a point where we just forget all that and we think we're all that. We think we're some kind of God when put yourself out in the middle of somewhere, you're helpless, you're nothing.
Get a stomachache or a headache and you're nothing all of a sudden.
You know what? I just realized what makes people feel like they're God is some sort of power over others. That is it, because when you're all by yourself somewhere, you're just nothing. But if you can somehow have power over other people or get them to see you in a certain way, now you can live some sort of illusion of power.
It's a pretty heavy thing right there, isn't it? Very interesting how we desire to be God for some reason. And I believe that it is also for some an unconsciousness, and we just let it go. Like sometimes you're holding onto your dog's leash and it wants to run, and if you don't bridle that dog and say sit, no, and make it come into your command, you might say, our pride and our ego can run off like that dog, and we stand there and think to ourselves, wow, I can't believe I did that or said that. And then somebody says, hey, that was cool. And you go, oh, really? Oh, well, I can even do more than that. And you start doing silly things and foolish things. And I remember as a young kid, I remember thinking all my friends, they would try and build me up. Wow, that was great. And I remember going, yeah, that was cool. I can do more than that. And whatever it was, surfing or motorcycle riding or driving cars fast, and all these things were building up the ego. And then you would search for those people that would build you up. And we do that also even in our hobbies that we have. We'll find people that are like, oh, wow, you have the best stuff. I've talked about this before. Look how many cars you have, or look how many things you have, or paintings, or, pieces of pottery, or whatever it is, or your garden. Look at your garden. It's beautiful. And then you all of a sudden really like that person because they like you. When the reality is, if you're doing it for the wrong reason, then it doesn't matter, does it? If you're gardening to eat, then it's nice to have a beautiful garden. But what's nicer is that it's feeding you. And you don't get your ego and your pride involved in it. It's feeding me. I want to take care of this. It's like a child. You want to nurture it. You want to keep it safe and protect it. But I look at some of the hobbies that I've been in with my, the car thing, and I don't care anymore. I appreciate the machinery. Now I have this big fat truck. We call it Hogwarts. It's just a big fat truck. It's old. It's been damaged and repaired like all of us, but it does the job, and I appreciate it, and I don't have a lot of money in it. And I think to myself, that's sensible. And Jan says to me the other day, she says, you like your truck, don't you? And I said, I do. I like it because I know I can do any job with it. I've always wanted to be the guy that can come to the rescue, you might say, of somebody in need. You need something? I got it. I got 2 trailers. I got 4 trailers. I got 8 trailers now. I got a trailer to fit anything. You want to pull a stump out of the ground? I'll pull it out of the ground. I got a chain right in the back. You want to pull a lady out of a ditch? We've done all these things together, Jan and I enjoy being of service. I enjoy that. Why is that? Why can we, one part of our life, enjoy building ourselves up, and then another part of our life take the same or more joy in being of service to others? It's a strange thing. I guess it's just you reach that point of maturity and you say to yourself, enough of building me. There's nothing there. I want to build towards the Father in heaven and do what he wants me to do. I take joy in that now. I wasn't going to do the talk today. My brother David was, and he didn't feel good. And I thought, well, we're going to have to drive home from Boise, and we were going to come home anyway, but we would have the day off. And I thought, no, well, good. Sleep in? I couldn't sleep in. My wife came in and says, why are you sleeping in? And I'm like, it's only 7 o'clock. And I'm not really. I'm just laying here watching my thoughts. But I'm happy to come here, even though I haven't got a dang clue what I'm going to talk about. I'm happy to come here because maybe one person may get something a little good out of it that helps them on their journey of life.
I say you're casting a little bit of breadcrumbs out to us.
Well, and only because I'm also following the same breadcrumbs that God is leaving for me, or my dad left for me. And I get it now. I used to think to myself, how can my dad give every waking moment to this thing he does? Because it was selfless. It was for others. He wanted to show people what he had been shown, teach people what he had been taught from the Father, from his inner understanding of life. And he never stopped. And I'm fortunate to have a wife that is on the same path as I am, or maybe I'm on the same path as her, or we're on the same path with each other. But we enjoy now talking about these things and exploring, and her helping me to see something a little different, and me maybe helping her to see something a little different about the journey called life towards our Father in heaven. Although my wife is very different than me in many ways, her emotions are right out in front, and mine are way, way, way to the back, because I feel like I have to be that armor plating that protects my family, and I can't allow my emotions to interfere in that job. That's a man's job, I think, to protect the family. My emotions are last, and usually when I'm alone. And I don't know why that is. Maybe because I fear to be viewed as being weak. But I think my wife's only seen me cry maybe once in 40 years. That's an unusual thing. And trust me, I've cried before after watching a movie or something that was touching. Braveheart. I was driving home, I was by myself, and I started crying, and I thought to myself, I am so fortunate that I didn't have to live through what Braveheart did. You know, watching his family being torn apart and his wife murdered and the rest. But the same goes for now. Instead of feeling, you know, all of these emotional things like, you know, why haven't I had this, or I'm glad I didn't have that, or whatever it is, it all gets wiped away with, I just am thankful for every breath I take. I don't worry about whatever the outcome is going to be. I don't want to be an outcome-based person. Do this to get that. I just want to try and live and be of service and allow God's grace to be the leading light, the light that guides me in that direction. And I think if more of us could live like that for each other instead of just for ourselves, we all live for ourselves, but if we could live for the community, you might say, of thoughtfulness and grace and thankfulness and service to each other, isn't that one of the most important commandments? To love your brother, your neighbor, like he is yourself? If that's one of the most important ones, by God, I'm going to do it. So we'll leave it at that for this week. And thank you guys all for coming. Thank you for supporting the foundation. We'll see you next week.